Alright. Good start. Let's find out. Okay, I need to drop that. There's that. Got that. Save that. Copy. And since Portal's actually working this morning, I can send this out. Oh, come on. Okay. Last time. Holy oops. Not for class. Come on. Choose the right one. Yeah. Alright. Ba. Alright, now while we're here, let's do a little bit of music. Cargonia.
Let's all go to Cargonia, land of stolen things. Obey the quartermaster unless he is a ling.
To Cargonia, land of stolen things. Obey the quartermaster unless he is a ling. Cargo takes cargo to the station to find more shit to take. The boss is never satisfied until the station breaks. Miners journey onwards, satchel and pick in hand. Checkers tells them not to die, but they've been in lava land. So he brings us to Cargonia, convinces his own high priest. This is a place of refuge, at least till the city was released. Hail, hail, Cargonia, land of stolen things. Obey the quartermaster unless he is a ling. Miners don't die a day, non-protects push pay. All enemies are in the slain. All hail Cargonia. Andy was masturbating, the lusty xenomorph maid was mating. Ian the HOP giving clown all access because the lizards had taken the station. The Hellburn was not complete, the blob consuming the ship a treat. Medical could not clone anyone, disrupted by the Tatarus, Cuban Pete. Botany scrambled for gun fruitlings and cultists and drakes abundant. The station was defenseless while security was beating all the robust assistants. The janitor scrambled to clean, the curator let out a tortured scream. The chef and bartender retreated to the only nation left on the scene. guarding, parting the sea of guards he comes. Randolph checkers a man above. He stretches a hand, welcoming in a cigar-wielding, seasoned grin. Give me your tired, your weak, your poor, your stupid minds and your clowns galore. The door is open, revealing the garden, Eden before you. Cold and hardened, engineer and scientist vanguards, botanists and displaced bards. Take a step in, bask in the glory. Cargo techs treat you in a hurry. Fat and clothed, you smile wide, just as a bomb detonates inside.
Turn my mic back on. Okay. I wasn't sure if I should start with something quite that heavy, but I'm like, screw it. Usually I have like, some atmospheric music from some video game, but it's like, you know what? Let's go straight on Cargonia. Excuse me. Yeah, that's the sort of nonsense that that Space Station 13 can inspire. Oh yeah, but I mean, this is early for that. Yeah, I mean, most of the time when I listen to music, it's in the car, so it needs to be heavy so that I can stay awake. But it's 10 a.m., man. You gotta take it slow sometimes. Okay. So, there is a video. We might get to it today that I want to try to show you guys, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to. Because I tried to show a video in my first class, and it does not like me trying to show a YouTube video through a stream onto YouTube. So that didn't quite do what I wanted it to do. Also, I don't need to have a second stream up. That was dumb. Okay. So, yeah, great, good. 23. Excellent. That's like basically the entire class. Good. We've had good turnout so far. In both of my classes. So good. Great. Thank you guys. Any questions before we get started? Any relevant questions? The more sidetrack questions we'll have to save until the end. Yeah, we'll just dive straight into it today. It's just weird, because I just started my other class. My other class is like just straight up Western civilization. It starts with like, just the beginning of humanity, and here it's like, okay, well, here's North America. All right, so this is the first chapter in our book. I got an email from somebody, and I apologize. I don't know everybody's names in all my classes yet because I haven't actually taken. I literally haven't taken roll yet because all of this. But based on the numbers, I assume most everybody's here. Uh, but I know a few people are having issues with getting the book. That's fine. We'll be taking it slow here the first little bit, um, and I'll put up the PowerPoint once we finish the PowerPoint, so you can look back over it if you need to. And if I can't get the video to work, if you want to look at the video, you can. Although now that I think about it, I can just post the link in the uh, chat here so you guys can check that out immediately after, because it's worth watching. It's like just a couple minutes long and probably before your time, because you're all high school students, I believe. So yeah, this will be before your time. Anyway, okay, let's do this before I make myself feel old. No, you cannot send me. Hold on. Wow. Okay, so my friend just killed me. All right. Yeah. Let's start with the. And if this wasn't clear. The movement of the native people into North America. So they first crossed from Northeast Asia, Southeast Asia, Jesus, wrong place. About 16,000 to 14,000 BC. Although there has been recent evidence, like literally as I was writing this, I think the day before there had been a this like scientific report that there may have been people in North America as long as 40,000 years ago. So these numbers may be off. Although the time frame for this event, the Beringia, this might still have happened. This whole land bridge thing, but the 40,000 years ago, that might have been a different event entirely. So don't worry about that. But what's important for the book and the notes is the crossing between Siberia and Alaska on this land bridge, because we think, okay, well, the Ice Age, that means that there's lots of ice. Well, that also means a lot of the sea is frozen, therefore the sea levels are lower. So there's a lot more land. And at this time period, they were literally able just to walk across between Siberia and Alaska. Now, granted, I'm sure a lot of that was ice, but also there was literally a land bridge there. So they followed, your mammoths, musk oxen, woolly rhinoceroses, etc. So some folks settled on the coast, others moved inland, and others moved further down the Pacific coast, which we'll get into those in just a little bit. Because by about 10,000 years ago, mammoths and other large game had gone extinct. So they had to move from, here's this massive beast that once you're able to take it down, it's going to feed you and your whole tribe for, well up to a month probably, to now you've got to spread out and search for game, for the hunting and gathering and the berries and roots are now more important than the meat. Fishing is actually super important for these people. There's a group in the Pacific Southwest uh, that actually was the most uh, successful, and they just fished. They would situate on rivers and set up like these big, not dams because that would block the river, but they would essentially set up these rigid nets across the river, I guess cages maybe, and the fish would get stuck, and they would just go in and get them with these pikes, and then they would just supplement that with roots and berries from the forest, and there were no records within like uh, any of what any anthropologists ever find they ever dealt with any kind of famine because fish, man. So that was super cool. 'Cause, if you're chasing bison across the plains, that's labor intensive. Fish are always going to be, coming upstream until you get to, the modern day where you can overfish and wipe out a whole population. But if it's just, you and like, I don't know how big a tribe would have been back then, maybe 100 people, you're going to be fine. So some groups settle down in stable communities. This formed horticulture, which was early agriculture, small plots of land, simple tools. This developed in modern day Mexico. Now, again, this is something that I literally talked about in my other class. But this was agriculture formed after settling down, not before. This wasn't like, hey, we need to grow plants, but we need to settle down. It's, hey, let's live in one place, but now that we're living in one place, we need to grow our own food. But the specific thing about this, and again, horticulture is literally bold in your book. So, hint, hint, that might be important. So, I mean, again, this is a college class, but this isn't a difficult book. Also, Beringia is in bold in your book. What's Beringia? It's the land bridge. There it is. That might be important because I've also got a map of it. See, there's Russia, there's Alaska. I wonder what the Yukon River looked. I guess it was just frozen over. Yeah, so that's where the Bering Strait currently is now, and it was just this big land bridge. I spent most of last night just like grabbing images, so I'm not super awake right now. Woolly rhinoceros, big old, big lad here. So let's see that we've got a scale there to the right, so got a foot there, so that horn is what, 3.5 feet long, maybe a little more, and he himself is much larger. The woolly rhinoceros was big. We'll just go with that. I had a better picture of it, but it wouldn't load properly. And in case you needed to know what a mammoth looked like, there you go, there's a mammoth. Oh, I should have pulled some of those dumb images from Far Cry Primal. I dropped the ball on that, I'm sorry. Anyway, here's some ancient horticulture images. Now, obviously, this is best recreation we can use, but they would situate their houses in the middle and radiate outwards with their fields, so that everybody would have relatively easy access to get to the fields and help work everything. Now, I know if I know some people might be more familiar with the Native Americans here in the southeast and how they did agriculture, which was very, I guess you would say, non-invasive. Um, they would grow crops and whatnot, but it'd be like they would do stuff and then they would leave, and everything would just like the forest would just come back because they were very low impact, I guess you'd say. Not all tribes were that way, and some would set up villages, and they had impact on their areas. So the fact that the Europeans came here and was like, "There's nobody here," it's like you're full of crap. Speaking of, um, there were three very large civilizations here in the Americas, largely Central and South America. The Aztecs and Maya in the Equatorial region, so you know Mexico and Central America, and then the Inca along the Pacific coast in what is modern day Peru. Don't leave me. Fine, be that way. So, now I could write a lot about these guys, but I wanted to just go ahead and get this part of the notes over with. And the book doesn't give a ton about them, so, did what I could. So 1325, again, don't worry too much about the years because this is very broad. We don't have exact years. I don't know why they even, this is about 1300s. The Aztecs built their capital Tenochtitlan? Yeah, that. Don't worry about it. Which is where Mexico City currently is. We'll get into that maybe next class. Now the let me make sure that chat is updating just in case. Okay. The Aztecs themselves were semi-nomadic, but they used the knowledge from the conquered tribes to basically absorb their knowledge of irrigation, cultivation, and written language. So, not unlike the Romans, where they were good warriors but not much else, and then they just took the knowledge from all the people that they conquered and ended up becoming this amazing civilization. Because rather than just burning everything, they took everything, which isn't that much better, but you know. So the Maya settled on the Yucatan Peninsula, near where modern day Guatemala is, between about 900 and 300 or 900 BC and 300 CE. They had large cities, stone temples, math. They also knew of the passage of the stars, so they basically had astronomy, not astrology. That's not the right word. Civilization declined, but eventually reemerged into city-states and was trading with the Aztecs by the early 1500s. So the Maya is an interesting civilization because it had like this grand old stage, uh, and then it fell, and then it came back, but it was splintered, and so like they were separate city states, and a city state is like it sounds. Every city is relatively independent of one another, but they still have this shared identity of we used to be this one great, empire, but now we're our own separate thing. And I always find the idea of something in the past is more advanced than what we currently have to be really fascinating. Which is something we'll talk about. No, wait, wrong class. Okay, it's something we'll talk about when we get to Rome. It's like, no, that's that's my other class. The Incas, much like the Aztecs, and these folks were down in the Andes Mountains in modern day Peru. Um, they built on the backs of previous civilizations. They had fertile mountain valleys. Their capital was Cusco. Um, Highly advanced roads, cities, intricate temples. So, despite the European I'm trying to think of the proper word to use. Despite the European view that all these natives were, you know, savages or whatever, these huge cities, especially like the Aztec capital, were compared to the modern cities of Europe at the time. And once we get into these conquests, I mean, a lot of the soldiers were actually questioning, like, are we actually here? Are we in some kind of dream world? Are these cities real? It's quite fascinating and horrifying that these things are just wiped out in such short order. So there's the Aztec Empire throughout the center of much of modern day Mexico. So yeah, you've got your temples here, and fairly advanced. I mean, they've got what's essentially cranes lifting stuff up and aiding with the building. And then the ruins of the stuff in the modern day. And this was, some of the things that I guess I wouldn't say modern day explorers, but explorers during the 1800s, because after these civilizations were destroyed, everything was just absorbed by the jungle. And then in the 1800s, when the Europeans were out exploring, they're like, oh, these cities and temples just hiding out in the jungle. It's like, yeah, because their civilizations got destroyed. I wonder what happened to them. Because unlike, say, the pyramids in Egypt, which are sitting out in the middle of the desert, these are in the middle of the jungle. Like here, you see these well-manicured lawns and whatnot because they're like heritage sites and they're being taken care of. But you see right along outside of them, it's thick rainforest and jungles. And, given a few weeks to a month, they'd be overgrown. So there again is the Aztec civilization there, Valley of Mexico. Uh, there in green is the Maya civilization, which was about as big, um, a bit more concentrated there in the Yucatan Peninsula. Um, so not as widespread, not broadly as the Aztec civilization, but still certainly a major power player. Even if, as we mentioned, it did fall from its major position of power, but once it rose into its at least relatively stable state of the city-states, they were trading with the Maya, or the Aztecs rather. Sorry. So there's a Maya temple. They're a little bit different. I couldn't sit here and tell you the difference between them just by looking at them. I'm not. This is very much not my area of expertise. I know very little about Latin America in terms of history. That's very much a deficiency on my part. But I felt like I should give you a smattering of each. And then, of course, the Inca here, which is actually massive. It's, thin, but you've got the Andes all along here. So, I mean, you can only really spread so far because the Andes are massive mountains. But just, it's almost the entire western coast of South America. And you've got Cusco here in the middle. And it's just spreading out from each end. And there's some ruins that we can see today. Actually, my cousin went down to Peru, and I know this because she sent some pictures back, and I distinctly remember, like, if not this exact image, at least one that looked almost identical to this, with that mountain in the background and those ruins there, except it was raining, because as you can see, I mean, we're basically at the cloud line here. And if you've ever been in the mountains, and it doesn't even have to be, this extreme of mountains, just the Smoky Mountains. If you're at the level of the clouds, all you gotta do is have a cloud come by and you're essentially in the rain, because that's what clouds are. So yeah, you're always in the rain. Oh crap. Alright, hold on, let me fix that. Why did that not work? Alright, let me fix that. Okay, hopefully that's correct. Okay. Save. That's the right one? Yes. Okay. And there we go. Some on-the-job maintenance. So, moving north of the Aztecs and the Maya and all of that, up into North America, you've got I have to be careful not to say Mongolian, because that's the wrong continent. You've got the Mongolian potters. I still put an N in there. Mogollon potters. Hohokam irrigators, um, which were, less advanced than the Aztecs and Mayas, but they were still doing impressive stuff. I mean, they were, creating pots out of clay and creating irrigation, which is not nothing. Uh, Now, granted, this was 500 CE, so in Europe at that time we had Rome. What? Well, no, 476. Rome had fallen, but I mean we had been through Rome by that point. So, yeah. Around 750, we had the Pueblo. Their masonry houses cut into the cliffs, which was built around the kiva, or the sunken ceremonial room. They moved south, constructing large freestanding buildings, but eventually moved back to the cliffs. So there's a lot of back and forth with the Pueblo natives due to seasonal issues. But their stuff is visually impressive because it's all, well, not necessarily all still there, but there's just so much still there. You can look and just see it, and it's there blatantly. Whereas, so many Native Americans had these homes that were temporary and mobile, and the only way you can see what they were are these recreations, and it's not nearly as impressive as, hey, look, here are these homes from 1,000 years ago that these people built and lived in. Obviously, we still have these tribes that live further north in the plains, followed bison, use spear throwing device called the Atlatl. Again, these I can't pronounce. I'm so used to having to pronounce German and French and stuff, then it's like, oh, now I have to pronounce Native American. I don't know what I'm doing. These groups, though, because they needed to stay mobile and constantly hunt, were usually not very large in number, because if you're constantly moving, there's not a lot of time to build a large population. And also, very much survival of the fittest. If you're constantly moving, chasing bison and whatnot, if you're a sickly child, you're not going to make it. This is probably the tribe that I had read about in that other class that I mentioned, the Chumash tribe. They were on the Pacific coast. They have had hunting and gathering, but also fish, mostly fish. They, as I said, set up in the rivers. Excuse me, darn. And they had a very stable society in the Pacific Southwest. Because fish is a very nutritious source, or very nutritious food, and it's high in protein, vitamins, and relatively easy to catch. Especially in like trying to use words today. Especially in the relatively shallow rivers on the western coast. Now, the Hopewell tribes, I say tribes, were especially interesting because it was massive. Between 4,000 and 6,000 people. Their settlements had these huge burial mounds, sculpted earthworks, other large symbols of culture, which still exist today. So that was that thing that was up that I had to fix. But yeah, we actually still have some physical evidence of a number of these tribes, which is good. Like I said, again, most of these groups were not terribly permanent in their settlements or creations, which is unfortunate. You know, you've got like Egypt's got these massive stone pyramids, and you know, in Europe you've got these castles and whatnot. And then with the Native Americans, I mean, you've got the Aztecs and Incas and Mayas, but these are the ones everybody knows. But then these other groups are like, they just kind of disappear, and it's really depressing. So here are the Pueblo houses, the adobe houses made from literally mud. I mean clay, you know, the mud and the grass. I should have another image, I think. Yeah, this one's really neat because I mean it shows how they built it under under one of these large cliff faces for extra protection. And then you got a bunch of tourists that I didn't see before. Thanks, tourists. But yeah, I mean it's super cool to see all of this. You know, just physically there, rather than here's a recreation of what we think this might have looked like. Because when I was in Ireland, I had my hands on all sorts of really old stuff because it's all still there. Like here, you know, it's hey, this is probably what all this looked like. It's like, okay, that's great, but you know, is it what it looked like? Like, well, probably. Or is it, you know, our interpretation? Which again is why the fact that a lot of these groups didn't have written languages is sad, because we don't have records. This was likely, you know, the Plains natives. This is the Atl, however that's pronounced. Now, the thing itself that I can't pronounce is actually the arrow or dart, and then you use the tool to throw it, and it's like this little. It's basically a hinge, and you can see there at the bottom. It just gives you that extra bit of throw there. Better velocity and dart throwing. +100 temporarily store energy during the throw. So yeah, it's very efficient at getting at throwing a dart or a spear or even an arrow. Now, the evolution to an eventual, you know, bow does eventually leave this relatively obsolete, but I mean, just being able to, you know, huck spear or something is pretty cool. So there is, I think this was the Chumash, yeah. The way their houses were built, using, this might have been further north, using like whalebone. Yeah, that's whalebone. And the power lines in the background. Yeah, so you've got California here, and this is the region that where the Chumash were located. was this region down here in southwestern California. Not that I know anything about California, so I don't know what any of this is. But I feel like, I guess if someone was from California, they'd be like, oh yeah, I know where that is. I don't know. California's a big state. So here are some of the earthenworks that the Hopewell tribes have made, and it's these large embankments, forts. A lot of times they would be tombs. It's quite interesting. I mean, this stuff is really old, and it's the sort of stuff that, I mean, like we saw some of these in Ireland that were from thousands and thousands of years ago, and the only inkling that we have of what they were for is from like literal fairy tales. So it's interesting that like we have these around the Mississippi River. This is does it say, does this have any states? Doesn't give me any states. But I mean, let's say right here, like all down the Mississippi River, but you don't hear about it. But also, this just shows how impressive the Hopewell group was, because it wasn't just a group. Like, hey, here's the Ohio Hopewell. Well, there's New York Hopewell. You've got Kansas City Hopewell. Well, obviously not Kansas City, but Kansas City Hopewell, Cooper Hopewell, and then all these other groups that they traded with, including this Smith Creek, all the way up to the Laurel Complex up here and what would become Canada. So they were, I mean, this is a massive association of people who traded and interacted and, if not worked together, at least interacted with one another. And it's largely due to this river complex that travels throughout the continent. But again, all of these are, even if this was, different groups of Hopewell, they were still different groups, even if they all identified as Hopewell. They were still separate. And then there's other separate, groups as well. I just want to make sure before we get to the Europeans, it's like the Native Americans were very, very different from one another. It's not, hey, it's the natives and then the Europeans. Speaking of the Europeans, so we're going to have to cut into Europe pretty late in the game. In fact, this is going to be near the end of the class that I'm currently teaching in my 8:30 block. So we'll start in Europe in the mid 1500s. Islam was placing pressure on Western Europe. Eventually, the Crusades happened. Let's see. Yeah. Now, granted, it does mention that the Muslims' greatest competitors are Ottoman Turks, not European Catholics, but there was a lot going on, and the Pope's like, oh, let's distract everybody by fighting the Muslims. So the Crusades' goal, which was to establish Christian settlements in the East, failed. It did push for more exploration for the Europeans, which was to say Marco Polo, who traveled to China in the 1270s and introduced Europe to exotic items and ideas. Now I know I said mid 1500s was the Crusades, then we're going back to the 1270s with Marco Polo. There's a little bit of back and forth with our dates here, don't worry about it. But the Crusades really opened up the East in terms of the exploration, or at least this desire for Europeans to explore, because before the Crusades, there was pretty open trade, so the Europeans didn't have to worry about it. But then after the Crusades, it was pretty just plain hostility. So they couldn't trade through the Middle East anymore. But trading with the East, or trading with Asia wasn't always beneficial. Italian traders in the 1340s brought the bubonic plague, or the Black Death as it was known, and killed nearly half of the continent within 4 years. And Britain and France were fighting their 100 Years' War at the time, so, you know, not great. If you want to experience something like that, at least until the end when things get weird, there's a mid-tier game, A Plague Tale: Innocence, that but it takes place in France in the period of the Black Death, but also the 100 Years' War, so you have to deal with both, and it's pretty grim. But then things get weird at the end. Now, eventually the plague did ease off. Things picked back up in Europe. We had the Renaissance, which you had all sorts of fancy art. Excuse me. Also new technologies, unified governments, which, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Wait, do we talk about that? Hold on. Do we not? Well, the Protestant Reformation leads to unified governments because they're like, oh, we got to unify against these Protestants. But don't worry about that. So Spain and Portugal send explorers and missionaries to try to find new riches and also people to convert. So here we have the Crusades, because you know that's how knights fight on horseback. He's doing fine. I love medieval nonsense. That horse is not having a good day. More Crusade stuff. This is a siege. Oh wow, this is everybody. This is the Ottoman Empire. Not the Ottoman Empire, I'm sorry, that's stupid. This is the Holy Roman Empire, so what will become Austria. That's why it's the two-headed eagle. This is France, and this is England. All besieging what I'm guessing is Jerusalem. I mean, it's wrong. They've got cannons. But I guess that's the implication here. Alright, so here's the. I literally just briefly mentioned the Crusades. I'm like, I've got to pull some more stuff for the Crusades. So this is actually all the Crusades. First, second, third, fourth, a couple of extra Crusades. We don't actually talk about the Children's Crusade. That didn't really work. The first Crusade is the only one that actually did anything. The fourth Crusade is the one that Richard Lionheart went on and he got captured because he's an idiot. One of the Crusades ended with them just like attacking a Jewish town and burning it down because and I think it was there were two more crusades. The sixth crusade ended with them attacking Constantinople instead of like going over here to the Middle East. It was nonsense. So there's Marco Polo. Sometimes I wonder about these portraits. So there's his route he took, which is, pretty impressive. Went down from Venice, down to Jerusalem, through Iran, and then overland, all the way through India, Himalayas, into China, Beijing, and then took the sea route home. I mean, that ain't nothing. Oh, yes, and the plague. Saying, what's this again? Yeah, so the plague came from Asia, hit Italy first because that's where the ships came in, and then just spread north and east because of the cold. The cold slowed it down, but it didn't stop it. And that would have taken this slide alone, this section in my the 103 class is like most of the class period because there's a lot to talk about with the Black Death. There's a lot to talk about with the Black Death. Oh yeah, and the 100 Years' War too. Also, this isn't how you engage in ranged combat. Just FYI, if you've got a bow or a crossbow, you're going to want to stand further back than that. Just for future reference. I could also talk about the 100 Years' War all day. That's something I actually know about. Especially the first. That's the Battle of Crécy. Yeah, that's the Battle of Crécy. I could talk about the Battle of Crécy all day. Love the Battle of Crécy. Because the French got the crap kicked out of them. This is the why am I not finding the right word? The Chapel of Florence in Florence, Italy. This was the first time a dome had been built since the fall of Rome, because they had literally lost the technique for building a dome. Because, that literally, the ability to build concrete had been lost, the ability to build domes had been lost, the ability to build arches had been lost. The Dark Ages were bad. Portugal, Portugal, Portugal. We'll do Portugal, and then I think we'll call it. So, the Italian city-states were in charge of the Mediterranean. North Africa was, controlled by the Muslim forces. So Portugal's like, well, let's figure out how to get to India without using the Mediterranean or North Africa. And we need to try to get to India because getting to India is the big goal here. So I'm sure most of us have heard of Prince Henry the Navigator. So he pulled together knowledge from the Arabic world, hired Italian cartographers. We're going to hear a lot about Italian cartographers and navigators. Worked with Portuguese sailors to try to find an Atlantic route to India. While doing this, they developed a new type of ship, caravel, narrow hulls, triangular sails. Very good at sailing along the West African coast. Just a moment. So by 1487, they had a trading post on the Gold Coast, which is in modern-day Ghana. Bartholomew Diaz around the Cape of Good Hope. The Cape of Good Hope is one of the most terrifying places for a mariner because So the weather there is bad, consistently. The seas are bad. The rocks there are terrible. The water is very cold. But there's something else consistently in that water off the tip of southern Africa that makes it so you do not want to get in a shipwreck there. Does anybody currently awake in this class know what's in the water off the tip of South Africa? And had class started last week, I could have made some comment. Also make sure YouTube's keeping the video live because it's being weird. Yes. Do you know what kind of shark specifically lives off the coast of South Africa? Like, this is where you can find this type of shark. Worse. Much worse than a hammerhead. Literally the nightmare shark. This is where, I'll just tell you, this is where the great white lives. I mean, the great whites live all over the world, but off the coast of South Africa is, like, anytime you see like a Discovery Channel or a National Geographic Channel documentary on great whites, they usually go to South Africa because that's where they all are. So this Cape of Good Hope was terrifying. Yeah, so you're in these little crappy boats. You're in these little crappy wooden ships, and you know, the weather can be rough and the seas are bad and you don't know where the rocks are, and there's freaking great whites. Yes. And there's freaking great whites down there, nearly as big as, you know, in some cases as big as your ship. It's like, no, this is horrifying. But it's the Cape of Good Hope, because you hope this is the turning point where you can go up and get to India now. So eventually, Vasco da Gama did follow this in 1497 and returned to Portugal in 1499, loaded with exotic and expensive spices. Also, I apologize. I'm noticing a little bit of lag on some of your answers. Make sure that the video is staying live. It likes to kick it back on me every now and then, just so that we can try and maintain some amount of clarity. I know there's always going to be a little bit of lag with the stream, but yeah. So let's see what I've got here. I should have pulled. I'm only now thinking about the Great Whites. So there is Henry the Navigator. I mean, that's literally his statue is him with, you know, pointing out over the sea, holding a map. Oh, I forgot to talk about this. Well, we haven't done too much yet. In the future, when we are showing portraits, I'm going to talk a lot about the symbolism in portraits. Now, this isn't a portrait. This is a statue with, you know, the Alamy watermarks all over it. But you know, he's got here a map. And it's very clearly a map, and they've even like etched it in there. So this is, you know, he's the navigator. He's the one that's gonna get us to India. Because famous people are always very big about that. So here is a digital rendering of the Portuguese caravel. It was a narrower ship with these big square sails. It was good for ocean travel, or at least staying near the coast of Africa, because most ships were for Mediterranean travel and weren't really suited for being out in the ocean. This could handle the rougher seas a little bit better. There is, I already lost the name, that's Bartolomeu Diaz. Again, you've got symbolism here, obviously the sailor. I guess this is a compass. I'm actually not sure what that is. His sword, I guess implying his nobility, or perhaps that he's a warrior. And I mean, I bet even the color of his outfit implies something of his Portuguese heritage, but I don't know all of it. And there's Vasco da Gama. Again, I mean, this is literally painted as if he was on a ship. So again, that's a big ship. Look how big that ship is in the background. He's again on a ship here. There's literally the Portuguese flag from back then. He's got a map in his hand. He's got his hand on his sword here. That sword is more ornate than the sword there. He's got a chain here with the cross, so he's, you know, he's spreading the light of Christianity. But he's also got armor, so he's, you know, a warrior for Portugal. I'm going to bring this up a lot. Portraits are very, very symbolic. So yeah, here's all their stuff. So Henry the Navigator was able to get ships sent about this far down the African coast. Now, originally, they didn't get even as far as the Canary Islands. The Canary Islands were a test bed for Portugal in a lot of ways, both good and bad. They also were like, hey, we can wipe the natives out and bring slavery instead of using native labor. So that was a thing. Diaz did make it all the way down here to the Cape of Good Hope, where all the sharks live. And then Da Gama all the way down. I mean, then he way out here in the Atlantic. And then made his way up and then across to India. A little bit more Portugal. Taking Indian trade from Arab fleets. Reaching Indonesia, China, Japan. And so the Europeans got more, started to expand their taxation, waging more war, and they also expanded their reach into slavery. Now, slavery wasn't new. I mean, literally, I was talking about Mesopotamia in my previous class, you know, like one of the first civilizations to have writing, and one of their classes in society was slaves. Like you've got your nobles and your regular folks and your slaves. Like we've had slaves for as long as humans have existed. Not to say it's normal, but that's been a thing. But the way that slavery was done at this point changed. Because before it was just like captives of war, you know, oh, you were defeated in war, and rather than just being put in a prisoner of war camp, you're gonna do some menial labor, which is basically what we use our prisoners for now anymore. Or sold for payment, yada yada yada. But the European push into the African slave trade did change things. And even then, even before, it wasn't inherited. You know, if your parents were sold into slavery, you were born and you were free. You didn't really have anything, but you weren't automatically a slave. So yeah, that's dark stuff, which we of course are going to get into. So that's that. We pushed much longer than last time, but we technically got until 11:15. But yeah, that's it for us. Thanks for sticking with me, folks. I'll have something. Well, we'll see what I feel like next Tuesday for our pre-class tunes. Anything before we go? Any questions or concerns? You know, no sort of assignments. If you have the book, just, you know, read ahead a little bit. We've gotten 7 slides in, so we're about halfway-ish through the chapter. I mean, I'm on page 10, 12 of my book, but again, your book might be a little bit different than mine because mine's the really old one, so the page numbers might be slightly different. But yeah, this is chapter 1. Yes, this is like a little bit less than the first half of chapter 1. Yeah, you can actually see it down at the bottom. I've got 19 slides for this chapter, and we are currently on slide 7, so we're a little less than halfway through. Though technically slide 1 is just the the title slide, and slide 19 is just conclusion. So, you know, take that as you will. But yeah, so we're starting chapter 1 and going through chronologically. And I'm gonna bust my butt this weekend and try to knock out the next chapter because I'm gonna be doing it right here alongside you guys. And I'll put the notes up as we finish the chapter so you guys can go through it again if you missed anything. Although you'll have the playback on my page here if you need to go through and look at it again. So it won't be too bad. So yeah, all set, all good. I've been getting messages from people who don't know why. Well, I mean, to be fair, my friend who messaged me just a second ago is in Italy, and it is 7 o'clock where he is right now, so he doesn't know what time it is where I am. I mean, he does, but I mean, I just started teaching again, so I'm gonna answer him in just a minute. All right, y'all take care. Have a good weekend. Be safe. All that good stuff. Don't get sick. It's not fun. I've already had it. I know this online stuff is kind of lame, but for real, I've literally had the virus. It's not fun. Don't do it. All right, y'all take care. If you have any other questions, just email me. So, see you later. Bye.